What's going on, everyone? It's another episode of the WVSports.com podcast. I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by the one and only Keenan Cummings. The 2024 calendar year is almost closed, so happy new year to all. But with that, it is certainly not a dead time for West Virginia athletics. Football is in a big period right now of acquiring assistant coaches under Rich Rodriguez, of using the transfer portal to both ways, losing guys and gaining guys. And then also men's basketball gets going in Big 12 play with welcome to the Big 12, Darren DeVries, Kansas tomorrow afternoon. So Keno, happy holidays, my man. And just let's start here with the coaching staff. A lot of moves. Biggest one was Zach Alley as the defensive coordinator, assistant head coach, coming in, poaching him from SEC school in Oklahoma, basically. So what are your thoughts on Alley? And then we'll kind of dive into the other guys on staff.
Yeah, the name didn't surprise me at all. I mean, how quickly did we have articles ready to go, whenever Rich was hired? I mean, was it a couple days?
Yeah.
And that was the name that we had heard from the start that Rich Rodriguez would like to have as his defensive coordinator. Now, the question was, were they going to be able to pull it off? He was co-defensive coordinator for Oklahoma, but he did call the plays. Had kind of a mentor. Brent Venables had served as his mentor at Clemson. So there were a lot of ties there. Now, obviously, there were ties to Rodriguez as well. He had been his defensive coordinator for 2 years, worked with him at Louisiana Monroe. So there were some ties both ways. But this is a guy that was set to make $900,000 this year at Oklahoma. So I've already FOIA'd the contract. I haven't gotten it yet. We'll obviously update that when we do. But I imagine this is quite a financial commitment from West Virginia. And I think that it speaks to what Rich Rodriguez said when he was hired. They were going to go out and get a really good defensive coordinator. They had the money to do it. I think Zach Alley checks that box for sure. And they wanted somebody that was going to be aggressive. And that's everybody that I've talked with and all the research that I've done on him throughout this process. He fits that mold. He's a guy that can adjust to his personnel, is aggressive, brings a lot of different blitzes from a lot of different places with pressure. He's used the odd stack, when he was at Jacksonville State. He's used 4 down at Oklahoma. So, fast, physical, and aggressive. That's what you want on defense. And that's what Rich said, in his introductory press conference. He wants someone that's kind of going to force the issue on the defensive side of the ball. And he checks those boxes. And when you look at, where West Virginia's positioned in college football, no matter what happens with this hire, this is an attention-grabbing hire. This is a guy that Oklahoma did not want to lose. Very much did not. That's one of the lone bright spots where the Sooners have SEC. Their defense was very good. I'm sure you probably have the numbers in front of you. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but most metrics, they were very high. And I think that you combine with what Zach Alley's done, not just at Oklahoma. This isn't he moved to Oklahoma and had success. He had success at Jacksonville State. He's had success at Louisiana Monroe. So he's had success. So you combine that with what Rich Rodriguez brings on the offensive side, that's a hell of a start for the staff that Rich is putting together.
Yeah, here's some numbers. I think the easiest way to kind of look at it, especially when you're kind of breaking these defenses down, PFF has a great way where you can kind of compare among all Power 4, Power 5 teams. And among the 69 Power 4 teams this year, Oklahoma was 12th overall in defense grade, 3rd overall in rush defense grade, and 10th in pass rush grade. They're also 28th in tackling grade. So they kind of really get after you, and the metrics back that up. They had 9 interceptions this year, 35 sacks, 12 forced fumbles. Keenan, it was I know that it was like a drought of turnovers for this West Virginia defense this year, and it seems all this guy wants to do is try and make teams turn the ball over. High risk, high reward type deal, and yeah, as you said, it's an attention grabbing hire. I think you nailed that. Just with the terms of you go and get from a blue blood program like Oklahoma, get someone that they didn't want to lose. We know that Rich Rod has about $5 million or so to use on the staff, and it seems like he's certainly using it.
Yeah, I think that the thing that, kind of gets my attention, and I know it's going to get a lot of West Virginia fans' attention when I've talked with people about his defensive style. He's really creative, finds ways to make quarterback uncomfortable, get them off their first read. And, our Oklahoma site on Rivals gave me a really good quote. It's kind of like all gas, no brakes. That's the way that he calls the defense. That's the way that he expects his defense to play. And I think that's going to make a lot of people happy, because there were a lot of people that follow this program for a while where the defense was a little too passive at times. So I think that that's going to make people happy. Obviously, you got to get players. That process is underway, and we'll get more into that with some guys they're targeting or guys they've already brought in. But it helps to have a guy that knows what he's doing and has had a lot of success doing it. So home run. I mean, that's a home run hire. I don't care any way you slice it, any way you spin it. I don't care how much it costs. Getting a guy like that to come to Morgantown and run the defense with a 3-year contract too, I think that was smartly played. It's going to be good. Obviously, he's your assistant head coach now. He's going to coach linebackers as well. But it's the only official announcement we have at the time of this taping. We expect some more, in the coming days. But what a way to start. It kind of felt like this was the domino that needed to fall all along for things to really get rolling. And now that you have, we've gotten some names, and we'll go through the list of guys that we expect to be on the staff. But this is the first official announcement, and I don't know any other way you could start it just based off what Rich had said, the priority that he was putting on defense. And, it's important. You look at the Big 12, a lot of people that don't follow the league kind of think it's the league that was being played in, early 2012, 2013. It's a really defensive league for the most part. There's good offenses, but there's a lot of good defenses in this league, and you win with defense in a lot of ways. You got to score points, but you also got to find some ways to stop people. And if you can get an aggressive type scheme that can stop the run and force some people into mistakes, get tackles for loss, sacks, it's a different feel than what West Virginia's dealt with the past few years.
I also think, Keenan, going back to your conversation with the Oklahoma folks, is if you haven't read that, go read it on our site. But one thing that stood out is how he deals with mobile quarterbacks. Those guys are everywhere in the game right now. No matter where you look, especially in the Big 12, they're everywhere. And so having him and having a track record of being to kind of limit at least their rushing abilities, whether it be Jalen Milroe or Nico at Tennessee, right? Like all these guys that Oklahoma has faced playing some SEC football this year, and they were able to kind of limit them, especially on the ground. And so that's important to me, because how many times this year, Keenan, did it seem like West Virginia is close to getting something and then they just can't contain the quarterback running outside? I mean, that whole Pitt game, it felt like that was that for the most part. So that's an important piece. But then, yeah, it's a big time hire. It's the first one to go. We'll hear some names right now. So elsewhere on the staff that are expected to be on staff, nothing official. 2 returners, Chad Scott, Blaine Stewart. I'm not sure Blaine was ever a surprise. Chad, I would say, was a little bit of a surprise, especially because there was a good little gap there between end of bowl game, basically only bringing Blaine back, to then, Chad's going to be coming back too. I think that's big, just with any level of continuity with players. He's a very likable guy. We know that. And what he did in that bowl game was pretty smart. So what are your thoughts on those 2 guys being the only 2 returners on staff here, Keenan?
Honestly, probably 2 more than I expected, but if you were going to pick 2, it would probably be those 2. Blaine makes sense for a lot of reasons. There's ties there. He's a good young coach. My understanding is he's probably going to end up working with receivers, some inside receivers, when this whole thing boils down. That hasn't obviously been officially announced, but Chad will probably work with running backs. I haven't had any confirmation there, but I expect that's what he's going to be doing. So, like I said, if you had to pick 2 guys, those guys make a lot of sense for a lot of reasons offensively, and I think it's a good start for West Virginia. If you're looking at what you could have retained, there's a lot of things that, like you mentioned, Chad brings to the table just from a player perspective and just energy, and he's a guy that you'd like to have around your program, not only for his coaching, but he's also a very good recruiter. Same can be said for Blaine. He's just kind of getting started and already making waves with what he's been able to do on the recruiting trail. And I think when you're younger like that, you're motivated, it tracks. And it's really a good way for Rich to kind of come over the staff and find some guys that he thinks can fit.
Elsewhere on the staff, Rhett Rodriguez, probably with quarterbacks. Jeff Castile, his positions to be determined. There hasn't been much as far as a specific alignment there. You could tell me I'm wrong, Keenan. Ryan Garrett, likely with wide receivers. William Green, defensive line. And then Michael Neiswander, with tight ends likely, all have Jack State ties or Rich Rod ties. And so what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, also Bicknell too, the offensive line coach.
Yep.
That's a veteran coach that
From
has moved around.
Wisconsin most recently, right?
Yes, has moved around a lot. He worked with Rich in 2019 at Ole Miss. I think you'll notice a theme here with most of these guys. Outside Chad Scott and Blaine, but Blaine was around the program a lot when Rich was here. Most of these guys have either worked with, worked for. They've all had Rich ties, so that's obviously something you're going to see in any transition. I think it's a good mix. You got some experienced, really good coaches like Jeff Castile, Bicknell. Guys that have done it at a high level, at multiple levels. Obviously the offensive line coach is coaching the NFL with 4 different franchises. So anytime you get that's pretty good. He's moved around a lot, but obviously, has had some success. I think that, obviously Jeff Castile's resume speaks for itself. He's been a defensive coordinator for damn near 30 years. He's had a lot of success here at West Virginia. So I think that those two make sense. And then you got some good young coaches that really are kind of up and coming, and you need that. That's so important in terms of recruiting, and really when they're good coaches, it translates on the field as well. You saw that here with Neil's staff, some of the guys he brought in, like A.J. Jackson, guys that got it and understood. And those are a lot of times your real grinders on the recruiting trail, those young guys that are so appreciative for the opportunity.
Well, Marshall's probably another one of them.
Yeah, and financially it helps. Like it does, because you can get some quality coaches that
you can go get a Zach Alley for more money when you're not having to pay everyone more money on the bottom end.
This thing is a puzzle. I mean, people have to remember that. Everybody wants a Zach Alley at every position, but there's only so much money to go around. So you have to kind of find ways to make it work, and find guys that you trust and can do the job at a high level, but maybe everybody else doesn't quite know that yet. And that's the trick to it.
So first order of responsibility for most of these coaches is going to be probably hitting the portal, because West Virginia has lost a lot. They've lost about 85% of their production on offense, about 3/4 or 75% of their production on defense from last year. So a lot of names have hit the portal, Keenan. I think a lot of well-known names to a lot of West Virginia people: Hudson Clement, CJ Donaldson. On offense, a lot of younger guys, a lot of it's just been across the board. It's hard to kind of just go through them because there's been so many, but there's also been some additions. So let's start here, Keenan. Out of everyone who hit the portal for West Virginia and is leaving, who was your biggest surprise, and who do you think is the biggest loss? And it could be the same player.
For me, the biggest surprise, I think, just with the timing of it, was Kyle Altuner. And not necessarily from a production standpoint this past year, obviously, but I was surprised when he did. In terms of just general surprises, I think obviously Hudson Clement would be up there, just because of he's an in-state kid, and I know he didn't grow up here, but still in-state kid. But there's been a couple, you honestly, it's not always going to work. A transition's not going to work for everybody. It's just not. It's pretty hard to make that all fit together. But there's some guys that West Virginia's lost that they would have liked to keep. Josiah Trotter, obviously. Johnny Williams is another guy.
Remack.
Both those guys going to Missouri. Remack at Virginia Tech now. So, and there's probably some guys that are still in play. A guy like Trey Lathan. Maybe West Virginia's able to get back in and reel him back in the fold, or maybe some of these other guys. But it's difficult. Never say never with the transfer portal. I think that's the misconception a lot of people have. It's not often that it happens. Typically, when a guy enters, he doesn't return. But the one time that kind of isn't true is during a coaching change. So just because a guy's in there right now doesn't mean they're automatically gone. But obviously, once they get in there, it's an open market, and you can only offer so much money. And I know everyone's like, gosh, here we go again. But it's what it is, man. It's free agency without limits, and guys are going to go test their worth. And I can't blame any kid for doing it. I just can't. So some of these guys, most of these guys probably won't play in the NFL. So get it while you can. It's unfortunate.
Maximize your opportunity.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It has to happen to West Virginia, but
It's happening everywhere, though. Like,
yeah,
in
as
fairness,
I
it's
always
happening
say
everywhere.
too, I mean, this thing works both ways. West Virginia's going to bring in players. They're going to find scheme fits. Like a guy like CJ Donaldson, man, like he was a great ambassador for the program for 3 years. Yeah, I can't, he's going to spend his last year at Ohio State. It's unfortunate. I think he might have been able to do something with Rich here, but it's hard to blame the kid. I mean, it's kind of what happens. It's just the nature of the beast now. But West Virginia's going to bring in some transfers. They're going to bring in a lot more. They've already gotten 5 that we know of. Jordan Scruggs kind of highlights that list from South Alabama. He was very good last year for the Jaguars. He plays like a nickel type position, which is a good fit for something that Zach Alley does, with that kind of linebacker hybrid role. Maybe he could fit there. I don't know. We'll see. He's got 1 year left. He graded out really high for them. He was one of their best defensive players. And that nickel corner, which you need, that's such an important position anymore. It used to kind of be, your cornerbacks, your safeties. Now you almost have to have that guy that can play in the slot and play it effectively. I mean, look at all the trouble it's caused for West Virginia the past few years with injuries and just not having a guy that can handle that. So I think that's going to help. And then you got Rance Singleton, Walter Youngbear, which is the all-name team from all time. He's a guy that started 14 games, played in like 30 for Tulsa, former walk-on that's really developed. He's going to be your most experienced offensive lineman right now. That's kind of hard to believe because you've had so much attrition there. And, you asked me about earlier guys that have left. I think the place that people often don't think about, but is just true, where you get dinged the most is it's really hard to replace offensive linemen, especially guys that are working their way into position to play. There's just not a. It's kind of like centers and bigs in basketball. There's just not a lot of guys there. There's not a lot of 6'7", 330-pound guys running around. And if there are, everybody wants them. There's a reason you're seeing Ohio State and LSU and those type of schools adding the premier transfer portal offensive lineman. I mean, it's just kind of the way it works. Now, obviously, there's exceptions with coaching and, ties there, but it's tough to replace them. But, yeah, you go down the list here, you got Jared Bowie from Martinsburg. I remember him as a recruit, Jacob Barrick. So they've added guys. They're going to add a lot more at this point. You look at the scholarship chart, I think they're down to 69 or 70 as of us recording this, which that's going to continue to change as well. They've got some visitors lined up. This week, for those that follow recruiting, there is a quiet period, which means basically that recruits can visit campus, transfers 4-year or 2-year that are going to enroll in the mid-year. That's going to be in effect from January 1st to January 5th, I believe, or 6th. Transfer campus already got. We've got to continue to add more to it. So they should be adding some more names to this, and then they'll continue to add throughout the spring. The one interesting dynamic here now that really wasn't in play before is with the 12-team playoff. Every team that plays a bowl game, they've got 5 days after the bowl game or the playoff game for guys to enter the portal. So you're going to have more in that crop. And then, of course, you're going to have the spring window as well. So there's a lot of time between now and when West Virginia kicks off to add to this roster. I want people to understand that, not panic. It's the nature of the beast right now. They knew what they were getting into. It's kind of just the way it works. And anybody that I'm not surprised necessarily that West Virginia has had 20-some players leave. I mean, it's the nature of a coaching change. Now, was I surprised that the coaching staff held them together to play the bowl game? Yeah, I was. I really was surprised by that. But it's just the way it works now, and it works both ways. You're going to have guys coming in. Really, you're going to have guys that, in some ways, this coaching staff's going to handpick and recruit to fit their scheme because it's different. It's going to be different on both sides of the ball. You might need a different type of body for different things, and it's important that they're able to do that. And we'll see what the final product looks like. But I know there's some people out there that's really worried about spring ball. What is West Virginia going to do in spring ball? I don't want to say this the way it's going to sound, but spring ball is not what it used to be to college football programs. That's now kind of the summer OTAs. That's taken the most importance. That's when you have really your whole team together for the first time anymore with all the transfers. And that's where a lot of the work is done before fall camp. So that will be more of a date to target. Yeah, you want to be able to have an effective spring, but it's not necessarily the end all be all it once was when coaching staff couldn't work with players in the summer.
I also think it's important to note. I know on our board there's been a little bit of angst, I would say, in terms of, oh, when are they going to get coaches? When are they going to get transfer portal players? I think there's a cause and effect relationship here of you've got to get the coaching staff in place, and then they're going to get the guys they want. And you can't just go start grabbing guys when they don't know who's going to be coaching them. Because what recruit would say, oh, I'm going to go play for a guy who I don't know who's going to be like my basically guy who I talk to and guy I see every day and learn from every day. And so I think that that's something to keep in mind too for fans, is that this is a process, as you said, and I wouldn't look too far into this roster until we're sitting in about May or June.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel right now. And you could, with the way this works now, you could even have guys added all the way up till the start of the season. I mean, you've seen it before. It's important to note too, I think a lot of people confuse, for those out there that aren't as affluent with the transfer portal as I unfortunately have to be. Once you enter, you're in. There is no deadline to commit. You could enter today and commit in August. It's just entering your name is what matters. In West Virginia, I believe there's one more day for players to enter, which was set off by the 30-day deal when Neal was fired on December 1st. So you'd have one more day of players potentially entering. And then it kind of goes quiet, other than grad transfers, of course. They have their own set of rules, so they can enter at any time. But in terms of actual players, on the roster, I think you're safe, at least to spring.
And it's not like there's this junior college thing happening, right? There's none of that, right? No?
Yeah. There's a lot of things that are in play when it comes to the formation of this roster. And you're going to see a mix of high school kids. I'm sure that even late high school kids that maybe they were recruiting at Jack State or different places. And every coach you add to the staff is going to bring guys that they were recruiting or talking to or familiar with. And it opens up a lot of new windows. So right now, I understand people are seeing a lot more exits than entering, but it's kind of flashback to basketball when everybody was panicking about that. This takes some time. There's a plan to it. It's about really just executing that plan and making sure that by the time the season rolls around, you do have at least what you need to be competitive. And I think that they're well on their way for that.
Perfect segue into basketball there by you. Great job. Great journalism. But the West Virginia University men's basketball team starts Big 12 play on the road at Allen Fieldhouse. At least you get it out of the way, I guess. Biggest thing for this team, no Tucker DeVries right now, no Jaden Stone right now. Their status is a little bit up in the air, as well as Amani Hansberry, who did get hurt in their final non-conference game, but all signs point, I would assume, to him being back. They seemed pretty confident last week, and then DeVries, I believe, was pretty confident today. So, Keenan, let's go with Kansas. Number 7, Jayhawks. It's Kansas. I think that's almost what you just got to say. It's a Kansas on the road on New Year's Eve. What can go wrong? So where are you with this team through 11 games? 9-2. I think win total wise, they're probably a little bit above where we both thought they would be at this point. But who knows what it might look like, because the injury bug has hit them a little bit, and it hasn't hit them in spots they want to be hit by it. It's hit their best player in Tucker DeVries a little bit. So where are you with this team right now as they enter Big 12 play?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for West Virginia if they don't get DeVries back. Can they win games? Yes, but this was a roster that was already short on depth, and quality in some spots. And I think that without him, it's going to make it a lot more difficult. Now, we'll see. They have not ruled him out or anything, or it's been indefinitely. So who knows? Maybe he tries to suit up tomorrow. I mean, I'm not going to say never, the way that they guard injury information, but I think that this is a team that has definitely, you've seen it already. It's a team that has really, really played well for the most part. Outside the Pittsburgh game, which ironically, this is the next road game for West Virginia, a true road game. This will be only their second of the season, but outside of that game, this is a team that's had a chance to win really every game on their schedule and really outside of some questionable
yeah, the
whistle.
only other loss is in overtime.
Yeah,
So
yeah, a questionable whistle in that Louisville game. They might be setting at 10-1. So, but yeah, the Big 12 is a meat grinder. This is not going to be easy. I don't care if they have their full roster or whatever. Kansas is tough. You know, they obviously have the post presence in Dickinson, and they got some guys that could shoot it. So it's pretty much your prototypical Kansas team. They're good. Bill Self's a good coach, and it's really, really hard to win there. You know, West Virginia's 0-11 there. Now, granted, those are different coaching staffs, but not very many people go into Allen Fieldhouse and win. So could West Virginia announce themselves to the Big 12 in a big way? Yeah, absolutely. But depending on who's out there, that's going to be a tough nut to crack. And then it really doesn't let up. You know, you get a couple breaks in the schedule, but January is a meat grinder.
yeah,
You know, it's going to be tough. And that's with DeVries, with Stone, you know, that's with everybody. It's going to be tough. You know, you got that Arizona team that you beat coming up here real soon.
yep.
They'll be back in the Coliseum. Then you got Iowa State. You got to go to Houston. You got Houston at home. You close the month. You got Cincinnati. You know that it's going to be rough. So we'll see. I'm optimistic just because I like what I've seen out of this team. You know, they it's not fair to say they haven't missed a beat. You know, without the guys, but they have played well for the most part. I think the last game was a little hit or miss, but for the most part, they've done what they've needed to do, and they've played well in games without them. But this is obviously a different level of competition.
It's not only a different level of competition, it's like that every single night now. I know we had that little stretch in the Bahamas where it was 3 in 3 days, and then but this is just, as you said, it's different. They start with Kansas, then they come home to play Oklahoma State and Arizona. Then they go, Keenan, across the country to Colorado, to Houston, and then back home against Iowa State, all from Sunday, January 12th until Saturday, January 18th. Holy cow.
You
I
got to try
mean,
to win some of those home games. I know some of those teams are
yeah.
tough, but this is a league where it's really hard to win on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And
Add
there's
in
not,
travel, add in
yeah,
all every other factor. Yeah.
there's not really a lot of gimmies in the league, but you got to win. So like that, if they lose at Kansas, they've got to find a way to win that Oklahoma State game at home.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I mean,
because
just go
it
ahead.
can compile fast. Because right now, I mean, all we can say is what we know right now. We can't tell the
Mm-hmm.
future. You know, this is an NCAA tournament team right now. Now, are they an NCAA tournament 20 games into a Big 12 schedule? That's a different story. But right now, I mean, this is a team that's safely in the field. Now that doesn't matter. You know, we'll see how it plays out. But I think it's a testament to what DeVries and his coaching staff and the players have been able to do. You know, this is a team that not very many people expected much from, outside of Morgantown for sure.
And here there's at least a little bit of expectation now as we
Yeah.
enter the new year.
And I think it is important for people to remember that, yes, injuries happen, but if you're missing one of your best players, if he doesn't return, it makes
you're a different team at that point.
Yes, it makes it a little bit more difficult, and by little I mean a lot.
Let's play a game then, shall we? Looking at Ken Palm, they've got the Mountaineers going 9-11 in Big 12 play. So let's add in a 1-game injury buffer. So let's say 8 wins. So we'll go over under Keenan 7.5 Big 12 wins in the regular season.
Is the roster as it is currently, or do they get guys back?
That's up for your interpretation here. It's what you assume.
I'm going to stick with my theme here. I think it's working for me. I'm going to be optimistic and say over, but cautiously optimistic, because I really do think they can survive, you know, until Stone, if he's able to get back. But without Tucker, it's not just what he does, scoring and rebound. He's just such a presence. The ball goes through him, and he can let Javon play off the ball. Like he does so much for them, and it's really, I don't care. You can have guys try to step up, but it's really hard to replace that.
I mean, just go back to what we saw in the Bahamas and how we were like, we kind of marveled at everything this team did because of Tucker, and yet he was not scoring the ball well except for that Arizona game. And so it's tough to see. He's another coach on the floor. I mean, his dad's the head coach. Like he knows what his dad wants, especially when you go into these environments, having a guy that can kind of just calm everything down. He seemed to be the leader of this group too. but it's going to be really tough. I'll stick with you. I think they get to like at least 8 in the regular season.
It does ease up for them a little bit in the second half. Well, on paper. Granted, look, if you went by the Big 12 on paper in football, you'd look pretty silly right now. But
yeah,
on paper, it seems like it eases up some in the second half, but it's just tough.
It's night in, night out, and it's like some of the top teams in the country, and that's the hardest thing. Is like I think Rothstein tweeted like every game in the Big 12 is a NCAA tournament type of game. And so I think that's the hardest part is not only you have to bring your game, you have to bring that intensity. And when you get into the dog days of February where it's freezing cold, you're stepping out in snow in Ames, Iowa, and you've got 15,000 people that want to take your head off, right? And that's like, how do I bring it when we might have lost 2 nights ago at Oklahoma State? That's the thing for me is for guys who have not done this grind in the Big 12, with the exception of Javon, how do they react to it and how do they change? Because there's a lot of lower mid-major type of guys on this roster. And so the Big 12 and Big 12 conference play is a lot different because in some of those conferences, you only are circling 1 or 2 teams on that schedule. And compared to this league where you're circling all 16.
Yeah, and West Virginia's got to continue to get really good play out of some of the guys that have stepped up. Sincere Harris, Amani Hansberry, Toby O'Connie.
I've been impressed with Powell, I think, a lot too as a freshman.
Jonathan Powell, like Tenor for the most part, they've got to get good minutes out of those guys. They got to continue to, because if they hit a wall, you're already dealing with depth issues as is, and that happens sometimes.
Yeah. So anything else on hoops? You want to predict the national championship while you're at it?
No, I'm just going to stay cautiously optimistic.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the WVSports.com podcast. No matter if you're listening to this on Monday, that means hoops will be tomorrow, literally in about 24 hours. It is 1:46 p.m. on a Monday. So 2 o'clock tip, ESPN Plus. Happy New Year. Happy college football playoff. Happy transfer portal season. Happy all of it. We appreciate you guys listening, you guys reading, and all of it. So for myself, Wesley Shoemaker, I'm joined by Keenan Cummings, and this was another episode of the WVSports.com podcast.